from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.
At the Legislature today, protesters braved the snow and cold at the Capitol to rally against a bill that scales back the state's prevailing wage. The head of law enforcement for the Division of Natural Resources tells a Senate committee the pay scale set in code for his officers is making it difficult to recruit qualified individuals. And a special report about the city of Huntington's ongoing fight against drugs on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. A train derailment caused crude oil to leak into a section of the Kanawha River today near the Kanawha-Fayette County line. West Virginia American Water has turned off 2 water intakes in the area and is advising residents in Montgomery and Cedar Grove to conserve water or use it only for essential services. Sadly, it's a familiar story for the residents of the Kanawha Valley after last year's chemical spill in Charleston. Lawmakers today took up a bill that comes as a result of that spill, allowing sections of the Kanawha River to be used as a drinking water source for other customers. House Bill 2289 would authorize the Department of Environmental Protection to promulgate a legislative rule governing water quality standards for the state. Part of the bill would also allow the Kanawha River to be used as a secondary drinking water intake for customers in and around Charleston. After a chemical spill in January 2014 that left 300,000 people without tap water for days, many West Virginians questioned why there wasn't a backup water intake to use during the spill. 30 years ago, there were chemical plants clustered along a section of the Kanawha River, polluting a good portion of it. Today, however, the DEP says water quality across this stretch of the river has significantly improved because many of the plants have closed. Some environmentalists support building a secondary backup intake along the Kanawha River. However, some are concerned the bill may see amendments that roll back water quality protections in the state. At a public hearing at the Capitol this morning, about 20 people spoke to the bill, with only 2 opposing it.
The most regrettable aspect of this is that there doesn't need to be any trade-off. We can have businesses and a new intake without sacrificing public health protections. There is room for all of us on the Kanawha River, but not if we as a state continue to misinterpret what Category A means. Category A protects public and private water supplies that provide conventional treatment. It was never meant to impose unnecessary limitations on businesses and municipalities, limitations that don't provide any protection to an actual public water supply intake.
Without Category A status, more pollutants will flow into our rivers and streams. The unintended consequences of not protecting our rivers and streams from industries that care more about their bottom line than they do about our citizens' right to safe water will be loss of jobs, loss of population, and loss of businesses that depend on clean water, including my business.
House Bill 2289 has been referred to the House Judiciary Committee. Despite the bad weather, a large rally was held at the Capitol today against the bill to scale back the prevailing wage. Senate Bill 361 passed last Thursday in the Senate. The rally was organized by Senator Jeff Kessler, who's spoken strongly against the bill on the Senate floor. Liz McCormick reports.
Over 1,000 people showed up to support the rally on the steps of the Capitol building. The majority of protesters were union workers who were angered by the repeal. A number of Democrats from both the House and Senate spoke to the crowd, including Delegate Tim Manchin.
Snow out here, and it looks like Christmas. And it is. It's Christmas for the Chamber of Commerce. And guess who's buying the presents? You are. You're paying for the presents. You're paying for the presents because they're taking away the safety that you've come to expect after 60 years under Democratic rule. This is not a new agenda. They've been proposing these bills for the last 10 years since I've been here. We're the ones that have stopped them.
Anthony Jiven was one of the many protesters who felt like the repeal of the prevailing wage would hurt workers and their families.
They're basically taking food off our tables and our livelihood, taking food from our families. I mean, they get voted for us, the working man. They say they're for that. They need to show it. All these bills they're passing, it's not right. It's just telling us they don't care.
Laurie and Sheila are Teamsters from Wheeling, and they both feel like the prevailing wage is good, and to lose it is detrimental.
It affects our wages. The thing with the union is, you get treated fairly, good wages. It's made a huge difference in my life. I know it has in Sheila's also, and just want to support it. Same thing.
Right. Senator Kessler says he was very glad to see the turnout for the rally, and he hopes it sends a message to his fellow legislators.
I can make all the noise on the floor of the Senate that I'd like, and over in the House the same way. Politicians understand one thing, and that's the voice of their voters and the voice of their people. And quite frankly, I think many of them think they came down here, they won their election, and they have a mandate. Because if you look at the votes that are being cast, I don't call it a mandate. I call it a mistake, because there are so many things that are running out of there that are not good for the people of our state. I challenge anybody to go out there and say, I can't remember any of the new majority that ran on a platform issue of right to work and prevailing wage repeal and shutting down the 7th Amendment right to have access to the courts. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember anybody out there advocating those type of issues, and yet those are the things they're shooting right out of the box and ramrodding through, and I think the people of this state need to know it.
Senate Bill 361 has been sent to House Government Organization for consideration. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Liz McCormick at the Capitol.
In a moment, city officials in Huntington say they're making progress in the fight against drug abuse and trafficking. We'll have a special report. But first, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today.
Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 495 to provide for the County Local Powers Act. The bill allows county commissions to pay for the cost of infrastructure improvements, utilizing impact fees, service fees, and certain property tax collections and other revenues. Senate Bill 496, creating the statewide interoperable radio network for first responders to help assure the safety of all citizens in the event of disaster or emergency. And Senate Bill 497, to allow school nurses to possess and administer opioid antagonists at school. Up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 274, the request of the governor to allow flexibility to the Department of Health and Human Resources to comply with federal mandates under the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families program and to keep sanctions in step with those of surrounding states to deter individuals from those states from taking advantage of West Virginia's welfare system. Senate Bill 429, creating a one-day special license for charitable events only to sell beer similar to a wine provision. The West Virginia Alcohol Beverage Control Administration annually receives numerous requests for these licenses and grants them for wine, but there is no such license for beer. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 277 to create Noah's Law. It requires the creation of a certificate of birth resulting in stillbirth. Senate Bill 286, relating to compulsory immunization of students and allowing for a medical exemption. And House Bill 2004, to require the legislature's approval of any state clean air plan that's required by the U.S. EPA under the Clean Air Act.
Over the past few years, the city of Huntington has been working to make a change. From attracting small businesses to downtown to making the streets safer for residents and students alike, the Huntington Police Department is focusing on combating drug crimes to make those things possible. As Clark Davis reports, they're finding some success with unique methods.
Innovation, that's what Huntington Mayor Steve Williams thinks is the key to fighting drug-related crimes in his city.
We've had a lot of money and drugs and guns and everything that we've been able to confiscate, but it's like these roaches. We stomp a couple out and then they come out of the cracks elsewhere. The issue that we have is not just an issue that's unique to Huntington, and there's no solace in that.
One of those innovations is expanding efforts to not just fight drugs in Huntington, but throughout the region. Among the innovative programs the mayor highlights is the Weed and Seed program implemented in the Fairfield area of Huntington from 2008 to 2010. The program sought to weed out drugs and crime and plant seeds of community action. Fairfield is home to only 20% of Huntington's population, but the area saw 60% of the town's murders, 77% of prostitution arrests, and almost half of all drug-related crimes. Since Weed and Seed was implemented, both violent crime and drug offenses have dropped by a third. Huntington Police Captain Hank Dial says around 2007, they realized something had to be done.
That was when we realized that our traditional law enforcement methods that we had been applying were not working. Our crime rates had been rising for several years. Public perception was a low point. Drugs were basically taking over our city. And we began to search for best practices around the country.
The focus for Huntington Police is now the west end of the city. Police are using lessons learned from Weed and Seed and are trying to replicate those successes. The River to Rail program, as they call their effort in the West End, started in 2012 and is ongoing. Police report that drugs found in places like Fairfield and the West End come from big cities like Columbus, Detroit, and Philadelphia, and are most often heroin, cocaine, and prescription painkillers.
The reason they came here and the reason they're staying here now is that heroin that we go for $100 is going for $200 here. It's just more profitable here. There's such a demand here. We can't arrest our way out of this problem.
In August, National Drug Control Policy Acting Director Michael Botticelli visited Huntington to tour parts of the West End that have been hit hard by drug-related crime.
One of the things that we're looking at is federal, state-level databases that actually track prescription prescribing, and one of the initiatives that we're working on is to make sure that these databases can talk across state lines.
Mayor Williams says his newly established Office of Drug Control Policy is yet another example of innovative law enforcement, but the office will only be able to function properly with federal and state support. He says it makes sense to support Huntington's efforts because the city's size allows for programs that could be a model for the nation.
Huntington is a microcosm of all of the problems that are rural and urban throughout the country, and I think that by approaching this with the Office of Drug Control Policy is that we can discover some ways of doing some things, discover some ways of coordinating with one another.
Williams says the Office of Drug Control Policy won't be charged with trying to arrest a larger number of people, but instead will find ways to get law enforcement and addiction services to work together. Jim Johnson is the director of the office.
There's not anybody that's not going to be involved if we're going to be successful. You know, the communities, the hospitals, and neighborhood associations, obviously law enforcement. We've got to look at some different laws.
The focused effort in the West End led to results almost immediately in 2013, with 38 arrests over a 4-month period. Police also confiscated 242 grams of heroin and more than $18,000. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Clark Davis in Huntington.
The efforts of law enforcement officers in Huntington are showing results when it comes to the number of drug crimes in the city, but that change is helping to revitalize the community as well. Here to tell us more about the changes he's witnessed over the past few years, but to also talk about his experience during his first legislative session is Senator Mike Woelfel. He's an attorney from Cabell County, and this is his first time holding public office. Senator, despite the snow, thank you for staying around and being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the story that we just saw from Clark Davis about Huntington. Police say their efforts are working. As a resident, as a representative of that area, are you noticing a difference?
Yes, we've seen great collaboration among law enforcement agencies, state and federal. We've had great leadership from the mayor's office, prosecutor's office, and what we find is there are significant changes in a positive way with respect to this horrible drug problem. In fact, if you look at Huntington in a broader sense, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of investment downtown. The city is really, I think, experiencing an uptick.
It is. You can tell the difference just when you go to visit. You can see the change and the energy and the excitement there. But this is your first session as part of the legislature, and we should mention that you're only one of 2 new Democratic senators. So when you were running for office, did you expect to come in as the minority?
Did not see that coming. The voters spoke, and elections have consequences. It's been interesting. It's been the Senate is a very collegial body. That's a fact. People are engaged. They listen. They offer insight. So far, so good. I've enjoyed it very much. We're looking at a very aggressive policy from the majority party, which is taken some adjustment in terms of what I've expected.
When there's an issue that you're particularly passionate about or an issue that you're particularly interested in, do you have a hard time reaching across the aisle and getting the majority to listen to what you have to say?
I have not experienced that at all. I'm a fairly good listener, and I think by choosing your words carefully and your opportunities carefully, hopefully you build up a little credibility.
So one of those issues that you are following closely are some budget issues, in particular the funding for child and family services that we saw the governor cut last year. Why that issue?
A lot of folks, including me, were troubled by what happened last year with the budget cuts. So I'm very tuned in to our many thousands of children that are in poverty, our vets, folks with chronic mental illnesses, to make sure that advocates are there for them so that the budget process doesn't take advantage of the fact that they're not very well represented by lobbyists.
As someone who's new and in the minority, what's your strategy moving forward to make sure your voice is heard?
Basically, there are issues that I've embraced. For example, the nonpartisan election of judges that we passed out today of judiciary. Very excited about what that's going to do and take some of the money out of judicial races. That's just one example. Basically, I think it's being able to listen to your colleagues, do a lot of homework, read each bill carefully.
So, Senator, we've enjoyed following you in the Senate, and we're going to continue to do so. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, senators consider bills relating to hunting in the state. But first, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today.
Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2752 to deregulate persons who perform work on heating, ventilating, and cooling systems and fire dampers. House Bill 2773 to provide a greater incentive for hiring West Virginia workers by adjusting the amount of tax credit authorized for the West Virginia film industry. House Bill 2774 to develop better West Virginia educational standards tailored to West Virginia students, developed by West Virginia education professionals. Up for passage in the House tomorrow, Senate Bill 6, relating to medical professional liability for nursing home administrators. House Bill 2157, to provide that absentee ballot fraud or intimidation of voters is a felony. House Bill 2160, making the West Virginia schools for the deaf and blind eligible for funding from the School Building Authority. House Bill 2387 to initiate a comprehensive transformation in school leadership through a process that includes input from reports by Vision Shared and Imagine West Virginia and the State Board of Education to assist it in developing recommendations for better schools to the legislature and the governor. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 262 to move the Children's Health Insurance Program from the Department of Administration to the Department of Health and Human Resources. House Bill 2391 authorizes the State Board of Education to annually grant a waiver to a county board to implement a full-day early childhood education program that has children in attendance 4 days per week and uses the fifth day for staff to work on program delivery to improve student learning. House Bill 2523 to create a special revenue account to offset costs for the West Virginia State Police 100th anniversary in 2019. House Bill 2527 to create a task force on the prevention of sexual abuse of children. The task force is to develop recommendations and proposals for statutory changes, state education policy, and methods to foster cooperation among state agencies, local government, schools, and community efforts to prevent child sexual abuse. and House Bill 2776 to permit an oral pharmaceutical certified optometrists, advanced practice registered nurses, and physician assistants to prescribe hydrocodone combination drugs for a duration of no more than 3 days per patient.
For the past few years, lawmakers' work to balance the state budget has been a struggle, and this year they're looking at the same fiscal constraints. Those constraints, however, don't mean some state agencies aren't looking for more. Today, members of one Senate committee heard from the Division of Natural Resources about how their budget is affecting their ability to recruit qualified officers. Members of the Senate Natural Resources Committee took up a bill that would give Division of Natural Resources law enforcement officers a raise in the upcoming fiscal year and every year following. The bill raises the base salary for new officers from just over $31,000 in their first year to about $34,000. All other officers will receive a bump in the range of $2,000 to $6,000 a year. The bill then grants the officers a $400 a year raise for every year they remain on the force. Senate Bill 92 comes with a $1.1 million fiscal note for the upcoming budget year and a $1.6 million implication for the following year. That number may be tough to swing, but Senator Bill Laird of Fayette County, the bill's sponsor, questioned Colonel Jerry Jenkins with the DNR about the need for an increase to keep the department competitive.
Are you finding that increasingly difficult given your pay grades compared to competitive pays in other areas of law enforcement?
Yes, sir. We are. Right now we're trying to fill 7 positions, and us sent out 14 backgrounds to fill those 7 positions, which we didn't have that much of applicant pool to pull from. And we're finding a lot of these people have already applied for other agencies and they've been turned down. So it is extremely hard to compete with even small police departments that are paying more than what we do.
Jenkins also told the committee his officers, unlike many other law enforcement agencies, must have a 4-year degree or some combination of a 2-year degree with specialized law enforcement or military training. The bill passed the committee and goes to Senate Finance for further consideration. Senators took up another bill that Colonel Jenkins says will slightly affect the way his officers investigate some hunting violations. Senate Bill 278 would allow a person to carry any type of firearm without a concealed carry permit in the woods for self-defense. The provision was one some senators questioned, like Senator Ron Miller of Greenbrier County.
Does this make it more difficult for you as a DNR officer, as a law officer? Would this make it more difficult in what you do?
We would have to do a little bit more investigation to make sure that they are indeed hunting. Yes, sir.
Jenkins said the investigation would include taking an account of the other items the person may have with them, like blaze orange clothing, deer calls, or a skinning knife. Keith Morgan of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League says they back the self-defense provisions in the bill.
Within the hunting code, generally it is presumed if you have a firearm, you're pretty much hunting. And all of those laws were written well before the state went shall issue and before open carry was a common practice among West Virginians. And that is changing a great deal. And what this bill does is protects the right of the people of West Virginia to carry in the woods and in their vehicles for self-defense purposes and not be guilty of a crime merely by the possession of the tools, any more than any of you would be guilty of burglary for possession of a screwdriver.
The bill also calls on the Division of Natural Resources to create a defined crossbow hunting season separate from the current bow season and prohibits using night vision or drones to hunt. Senators approved the bill and sent it on to the Judiciary Committee for its consideration. This has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, we'll meet a father and son legislative team. Our guests will be Senator Chris Walters of Putnam County and Delegate Ron Walters of Kanawha County. Once again, a CSX train carrying crude oil derailed in Fayette County this afternoon. The train was traveling eastward through Montgomery toward Gauley Bridge. The train caught fire and destroyed at least one residence at the area. At this time, no fatalities have been reported. The West Virginia State Police is requesting that residents within a half a mile of the scene evacuate until further notice. The scene is described as being along West Virginia Route 61 near Armstrong Creek Road. This area is also known as Powelltown Hollow. A shelter has been set up at Valley Elementary School in Smithers. For more information about the weather, school closings, road conditions, today's train derailment, the water situation in Kanawha and Fayette counties, visit our website, wvpublic.org. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.